Hi, everyone. So I thought I'd jump on and take some questions. So I haven't been online. I don't think I've done a live session for like 3 weeks or something, perhaps longer. I've been very busy, and life is just sort of gets in the way a little bit. Um, so apologies if you've been missing me. But hopefully, even though this is a sort of a strange time of day, it's not really an ideal time for anybody in any part of the world, kind of thing. But if there's some of you around that have got some questions, then I'd be delighted to answer your questions. So Mohammed has just jumped in straight away and asked for a 2020 update, and so I'll start there. I usually do on some of these live sessions. Let's talk about DV 2020 and 2021. We're still waiting for the appeal. It's now just over 6 months since the appeal was heard in front of a panel of 3 judges. We were hoping that they would make their decision before, excuse me, let me just get some water, that they would make their decision before the end of January. We made that sort of hope or assumption based on some comment from a former judge, and some of the assumptions by the lawyers, but there was no guarantee. There was never a timeline promised by the appeal court, and there isn't a way to force them to make a decision faster. So we can only wait, right? Now, philosophically, I heard someone say the other day, look, if you can't afford to wait for something you want and you're waiting for the outcome of something, then just assume the answer is no. And you're not going to get what you want, and move on with your life. And so for some of you, frankly, I hope you've been practicing that sort of perspective. I get how big a deal it is to win DV lottery, but there's nothing we can do to speed the decision up. And even when we get a decision, many of you are still going to be disappointed. You're not going to get the green cards because there's a limited number of green cards available and more people that want them. It's not going to be immediate. There could be a further appeal process. So really, if you're worried about the timeline and you're not focused on the fact that the chance is being kept alive by sort of a possible win on this, then just move on with your life, and look at it that way, right? So we just have to wait for the appeal outcome, and then see what happens, to see whether we win, and if the government don't appeal, don't try and take that to a higher court, which would essentially be the Supreme Court. We can see if that happens. If they do try and take it to the Supreme Court, there's no guarantee that the Supreme Court will even accept the case. In fact, I think it's quite likely they wouldn't, frankly, but we'll have to see. Okay, so that's 2020 and 2021. Hopefully that covers it for you. Oh, wow, I see a bunch of questions. So a few more of you are awake than I expected, frankly. So welcome, thank you to everyone. Oh yeah, this is going to be another question. The VB is still not updated. The visa bulletin is supposed to be published roughly between the 8th and the 15th every month. There's no guarantee of that, though. And I've seen it published much later in the month, like the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, I think I've seen. So there isn't a guarantee it's going to be published by the 15th, and it's now a couple of days late. If you think of the 15th as being the time it should be released by. I suspect it will probably be out on Monday, maybe Tuesday, but probably Monday. But it's for something for 2 months from now. So why are people stressing about it? I don't know. It will say what it's got to say. It affects something for 2 months from now. Just be patient, all right? There's no need to worry about it. Now, the other thing is that people are saying, oh, what does it mean? They're late with this. Oh, they must be trying to do this and that. All nonsense. It doesn't mean anything at all. It just means that they're late in publishing it. And you got to understand that 95% of what the visa bulletin is about is not DV. So this is not DV holding up that 95%. DV is only 5% of immigration. It's very unlikely that the DV numbers are holding up the rest of the visa bulletin, or that anything to do with DV is holding up the visa bulletin. So please don't go down that path of thinking. It's complete nonsense. Okay. The visa bulletin is just late. You know, it doesn't mean anything, doesn't cause any concerns, doesn't mean the government are going to cancel the visa bulletin. You know, please, all the silly nonsense ideas I've heard about what this means, I mean, it's just silly nonsense, right? Doesn't mean any of that. Okay. Do people compliment you on your accent, Simon? My accent's pretty messed up right now. I've been in America for so long that to British people, I sound American. To Americans, I still sound British. Or some of them think I'm Australian or South African or something, you know, something like that. But yeah, so I don't get many compliments on my accent, not at all, because it's pretty messed up right now. When are the DV results going to be out? The next visa lottery is going to be announced in May, early May. I think it's May 6th or 7th. But it's a long process. Okay, so even though the results will be out in May, the winners are selected well, the winners are already selected, I believe. And they'll just be announced in May because they're doing some background checks right now to disqualify some cases even before the announcement of the results. So we'll have the results in May, but then no interviews will happen until October, and that will only be for the very earliest cases. So you know, a very small number of cases. So most people are going to be waiting for about 18 months from now. So just patience on that too. Thank you, Emmy. Sorry you missed me, but I'm glad to be back. AS 19K at Jerusalem, still at MVC. Is it normal? Yeah, absolutely, it's normal. I mean, it's very clear. Well, it's clear to me, and it's clear to some others, how things are going in terms of the work being done. Now, I have to say, actually, the government are performing very well from a point of view of KCC. They have so far they've issued 16,700 visas, roughly speaking, a bit more than that, right? And whilst that's not half, and some people, particularly a couple of lawyers, one in particular, keeps getting confused that, you know, that somehow he thinks that all of the visas need to be issued sort of in line with the month. So 1/12 of the visas should have been issued by the end of month 1, and 1/4 of the visas should have been issued by the end of month 3. It doesn't work like that. It's never worked like that. There's good reason why it doesn't work like that, but never mind. He can't be convinced. So the reality is they've done quite a lot. Now, they have scheduled 38,000 people. Okay. Now, they will only schedule probably at most about 70,000 people in order to reveal the 55,000 at most, I would say. So they're 38,000 right now. That means there's going to be that means in my mind they're over halfway through the scheduling. They've got 32,000 left to schedule, roughly speaking, right? Could be a little bit more than that, could be a little bit less than that. But that's roughly the numbers that they've got left. Now, there are some individual embassies that are misbehaving and screwing things up for the people that are allocated to those embassies. And that's going to be a very sad story because we're not going to be able to fix that. There are going to be people who will lose their chance simply because of bad behavior at some specific embassies. But KCC, and from a central point of view and from a global point of view, enough work is being done, enough cases are being scheduled for everyone, you know, for all of the visas to be issued. From a global point of view, the government don't care whether the visas go to someone in Johannesburg or someone in Nairobi or someone in Accra or someone in Paris. They don't care, right? Now, that's a bit of a glib statement, but certainly, let's say within Africa, They don't care which countries in Africa get the the people come from that get the visas. They just want a number of visas to be issued in Africa, right? Same in Europe, same in Asia, and so on. So if Nairobi embassy is screwing up the chance of its local selectees, which it is, same with Accra and some others, the government, from a centralized point of view, don't care as long as all the other embassies are taking advantage of the scheduling, right? So it will benefit some people, and it will be to others' disadvantage, unfortunately. But from a global point of view, they are doing more than enough scheduling. They're doing very well in terms of scheduling. They've done very well in terms of DS260 processing. We're in a much better position this year than we were last year, as predicted. I mean, I told you all when the DS260 processing would be caught up in terms of the backlog, and it was caught up when I said it would be. So, this is all a very predictable kind of thing. It's not mysterious. That's just, it might be a shock to some of you, but that's how it is. Now, I know not everybody understands how it works, but it's working well, with the exception of those bastards in some embassies, and they are. I mean, I've got not a good word to say about that. Okay, so some other questions. Please, our sponsor is retired with 100,000 annual salary. Can he be a sponsor if we're a family of 5? Okay. If he actually does have 100,000 annual salary in retirement, okay, then yes, he can be your sponsor. That's enough money. On my blog, I actually show the formula. It's the formula is related to the federal poverty guidelines, and 100K is more than enough to cover that. 100K, by the way, is a good salary in most of the United States. It wouldn't be good where I live. It would be poverty line where I live, quite literally. It's 117K annual salary is considered the poverty line here in California where I live. So, funnily enough, the government system doesn't really apply. If you earn 100K where I live, you're in poverty. If you earn 100K in Florida, you're doing pretty well. But unfortunately, you're living in Florida. Same thing for Alabama. And Florida is becoming so backward, you may as well be in Alabama, frankly, at this point. So there you go. But anyway, yes, you're okay if that is the actual income, right? Hi, Simon. I'm one of the rare cases that qualified via my parents for DV 2023. My visa was approved and I leave for America in June. Many thanks for your help. You mean you're one of the rare cases that successfully qualified, as it were, that actually went through the interview? That's great. When I read the first sentence there, I'm thinking, hang on a minute, the only real qualification comes at interview, and you've passed that. So well done to you. I'm glad you did that. And you leave for America in June. Good. It'll be nice. Why is the VB delayed? I've talked about that already. DV 2023 finished my interview. Oh, finished my interview on March 6th, but still no update. Should I be concerned, and what can I do? March 6th, 13 days ago. Come on, be patient, James. Just be patient, right? It's only 13 days ago. That's not a long time to wait at all. Let's see. Is Accra Embassy ever going to get any better? Wow. I don't know. I'm sick to my stomach of watching what certain embassies, including Accra, are doing. They are, well, there's no justification for what they're doing. Absolutely none. They seem to be just sticking to their guns on it. And there is no way we can force them to do anything different. So will they continue? I don't know. I hope not. But frankly, they've already caused the damage by Accra, for example, so far. Accra have taken, let's see. Accra have taken, in the first 3 months, they took 125 cases. In January, they took another 30, and in February, they took another 30. I believe 30 is the number they're going to continue with month to month going forward for at least the foreseeable future. That's nowhere near enough. That means that they would get to about 360 interviews in the year, 360, call it 350 to 400, roughly in that range. That's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. They should be doing at least 1,000, and so they are deliberately ruining the chances of people in Accra. So it's unforgivable, and it's not just Accra. There's some other embassies, as we know, doing the same thing. But there's nothing we can do to improve that. You can't. No lawsuit of that type has worked up to now to force an embassy to do anything. I think previous lawsuits have encouraged some behaviour from certain embassies. Sydney is an example, along with Fiji, who helped them out. But there's been no embassy that has actually said, "Oh, fair enough, we'll get on with it now because you told us to." No embassy has done that. No court has ordered an embassy to behave in a certain way, and the government centrally has said they're not able to control the embassies. So there you go. What are the chances to win again in the DV lottery? First win 21, still have hope I go. Okay, so your chances to win again is kind of like when you toss a coin, heads or tails. The coin doesn't know that the last time you tossed the coin, it came up heads. So the chance of the next time being selected or not is not affected by the fact that you won again, right? It's just the same chance. So you got the same chance every year, which in Africa, let's say, is something like 1 in 150 years that you'll win. That sounds terrible, but I can tell you, I do know people every year that win again, like a second or even a third time. And so, it's just the way chance works. Okay, your chance of selection is pretty low, but there are some people who get selected more than once. That happens every year, hundreds of cases actually, and mathematically I can explain why that happens. But as I say, it's got nothing to do. Your chances of selection each year are not affected by whether you were selected in the previous year or not. It's just like the coin; it doesn't know. Okay. Is the original photo with which I submitted in October 21 can be the reason to refuse my visa, and if it's not matching with the requirement? It can be. You can get refused for photos. It's not very likely. If you've been selected in the lottery, then your photo has already gone through a screening of sorts, a kind of disqualification process of sorts. And some cases do get disqualified. Now, but that happens even before you've been selected as a winner, right? Even before the May results are announced. So you don't even know sometimes. Like some people who see the words you've not been selected, they were selected, but then they were knocked out by their photo not meeting the requirements. Right? It happens before the announcement. So if you made it through into the announcements, you're mostly through the process. So as long as the photo was of you, right, and not somebody else, and you clearly have complied with the instructions, it's a relatively recent photo and that sort of thing, then you should be okay. There shouldn't be disqualifications at that point on photos. It's very rare to hear of photos causing disqualifications. Not impossible, but very rare. Okay. Okay. I update my new address and got to an L. Good. But now I can get the visa of my new address. Do the CO have the ability to reject, reschedule? What? Handis, try to understand what you said. I update my new address. Right. So you changed your address, presumably to some other country. And I hope that's because you have a connection with that country you had moved, I hope. But the second part of your question makes me think you didn't. Anyway, and you got the 2NL, good, right? But now I can get, maybe you mean you can't get the visa of your new address. You can't get the visa So if you lied to KCC and you didn't have any ability to get to that country where you said you were, then that can create a problem. Yes, that's not what I've said to do. I've not said to lie to KCC, right? I've said that the best way to get out of certain situations where you're going to be allocated to an embassy like Accra or Nairobi is to actually change your address to a country where you can or have moved, right? Or where you can say you can move to tomorrow, kind of thing, because your brother lives there or whatever, right? You've got a good connection so that you can be there. And for goodness sake, I hope you check that you can get the visa to actually be there, because you've got to be a resident there, right? So you must not have created a lie during a process with KCC, because that can create a risk of denial. Does the CO have the ability to reject the reschedule? They don't reject the reschedule as such, but when you go there, some CEOs will ask you for proof that you have permission to be in the place where you're interviewing, that you have residence there. Some do, some don't. I can't tell you, which embassies do and which don't. Okay. Can a sponsor who's sponsored other people, can they be your sponsor? I generally say don't do that. It creates a little bit of a risk that one sponsor sort of comes up on a background database. It can seem a bit suspicious, but some people have gotten away with it. So, it's up to you as to whether you do that. By the way, in Go, we can have visa for everyone if judges grant the cross appeal. That's true. Not very likely. And it wouldn't really be for everyone. It would be everyone in Go, right? But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. But yes, it's technically a possibility. My 14 years son, place of birth in his passport, which I submitted in the DS260 was wrong. I collected the place of birth in his passport. Shall I submit both passport in the interview? No, just the one. So if you corrected a passport, then the old passport is now invalid, right? So you just show the new passport and you correct that in the DS260. If you don't want to correct it prior to the interview, and for a child, you really don't need to, then you just correct that, mention that at the interview that you got it wrong. And because we're talking about a child here, a 14-year-old, it's not going to be a big deal, right? I made a mistake on address with the DV 2024 application. Can it affect your selection? Absolutely not. The selection is completely random. They don't care what address you put there. That's not a question that affects your selection. So no. But if you are selected, you must make sure your DS260 is accurate. Okay, take the time to make sure it's accurate. Correct all the information. If you made a mistake on your application, fine. On your entry, I should say, but don't continue that mistake into the DS260. Is it possible to know the number of DV 2024 applicants and the chance of being selected? No, we don't have the numbers yet. We won't know the numbers until the results are released. But roughly speaking, in some regions, it's around about 1 in 150. In the smallest region, Oceania, it just so happens that the chance of selection is more like 1 in 20, 1 in 25, thereabouts, right? It's much easier in Oceania. That does not mean, though, that everybody needs to change their entry to being in Oceania, because it's based on place of birth. And if you are from the African region, you claim to be, or you're from Asian region, and you claim to be in Oceania, you're going to get disqualified, right? If it's not true. So, I'm telling you the chance of entry, but don't, for goodness sake, use that to try and improve your chances. Okay. Can the embassy notice a DV selectee immediately at the embassy after interview? Notice in case the visa. What that means. Can they notice a DV selectee immediately? Can they notify? Perhaps that was what you mean. immediately after interview in the case of visa issuance or denial. Very often, a couple of things happen. So yes, it's very common for outright refusals to be explained to the applicant at the interview. If you are ineligible because you've made some mistake in the process, you claim to be single when in fact you're married, or you left off a derivative off your entry, right? Something like that. Or you're in the wrong region. You've made a mistake with the region. Those things are 100% certain to get you disqualified. There's no doubt about it at all. It's not retrievable. It's not fixable. And so the consular officer will tell you at interview, no, you're disqualified, and there's nothing that's going to be done because you did this, right? You left a derivative off your entry or whatever, right? So yes, they will tell you if the case is refused. They might say your case is refused under 221G, which means it's a temporary refusal, and that's for other types of things, not like the things I mentioned, but for other things like you've got to provide an I-134 to prove that you're not going to become a public charge. So they would give you a temporary refusal, right? The third thing that can happen at interview is they can give you an indication. They can say, "Oh, I'm going to approve your case. You'll pick up the passport in a week's time." That's pretty good. I would say 95% of the cases when that happens, that's what's going to happen. You're going to be approved. You're going to be issued. But in some percentage of cases, that decision, which is not binding, it's not legally binding, that decision will be questioned by a supervisor. And the supervisor will say, well, I know you told that person they were going to be approved, but actually we've got to do a few more checks. Put that person on 221G, right? Or even refuse that person. Oh, you approved this case where the guy was born in Africa and he's claiming to be OCR. No, that's a refusal. Why didn't you refuse it? The supervisor would tell the consular officer off, right? And it would be corrected, and unfortunately you'd be disqualified. So those things can happen, right? So you can't trust the approval that you're given at the interview. You have to wait until the visa is in your hand, right? Literally, when it's in your hand, that's when it's guaranteed to you. Before that, it's not guaranteed. Okay. Why the KCC slowed down with second letter this month, please? They didn't. So just before they actually continued to set up interviews up until the first few days of this month, and then they stopped because they're expecting the visa bulletin to be released. KCC already know the visa bulletin numbers. I guarantee you they already know the numbers. I know that for a fact, right? And what will happen is, as soon as the visa bulletin is released, within a few hours, no more than a day later, we'll have a large number of 2NLs being sent. And that's because KCC are already working on scheduling those interviews for people that they know are about to become current because they know the numbers, right? That's how it works. So you think they've slowed down? They haven't slowed down. They're just working on the next month, and they're going to release that. It would not be possible for them to issue like 1,000 2NLs 4 hours after the visa bulletin is released, unless they already knew the numbers. And we see them doing that every month, right? So I know they've already got the numbers, and I know we're going to see rapid scheduling of 2NLs, at least one large batch, probably with hundreds, maybe 1,000 2NLs being sent out within hours or 24 hours, let's say, of the visa bulletin. Okay, so just relax, nothing's going wrong. You guys kill me with your worrying. Okay, 13K DS260 process, ABD embassy. When can you expect the 2NL? I don't know. It depends. You're giving me some data there, but it doesn't really help me. What matters whether you get an interview or not and when you get the interview, is your transition date, the date when your DS-260 was processed and you were current and you moved into an AV queue, right? A queue of people in AV status. And then what matters is how many people are in that queue of AV people for that embassy, right? And I don't know any of those things. I don't know when you moved into the AV status. Stage 4. It's discussed in online forums as being stage 4. This is AV actually, so I don't know when that happens. So I can't predict it, and it partly depends on the performance of that embassy, right? So you have to just be patient and have a look at the data. You can look at the data yourself on every individual embassy on Zarthisius's page. Okay. How are you doing? Do you think the visa bulletin will not move for the 3rd month for Morocco? Interesting question. I don't know. I'm not going to predict that, actually. I don't know. I can tell you this. When I look at the data for Africa, and I look at, and in fact all the regions, there are a lot of cases that are already current that have not been scheduled for interview yet, and there must be, without them increasing the numbers, there must be a lot of people ready to be scheduled for the next batches. Now, whether that's the case in Morocco or not, I don't know. So we can't really get to that data until we can only estimate the number of cases per 1,000 for Morocco, and I haven't done that exercise. But because until the case gets to 2NL, we don't know which case, which country that case number is allocated to. So it's difficult to predict, and it would only be based on estimates anyway. So you have to wait and see. Basically, I would say I don't think you've got very much longer to wait. DV 2022 winner stayed in the USA 4 days last year. Want to come back next month? Should I file taxes? Yeah. If you enter within a year, within 2022, for even 1 day, then you should file a tax return for that year. It may have no tax liability, but you should file a return. Yes. Okay. And it's supposed to be done. It's supposed to be done by April 15th or 16th or something, but the federal government has announced a delay of that, so you'll be able to delay that a little bit. So don't worry about being late. You can still file, but it is important to file for each of the years. When you go for citizenship, which takes a few years, you have to be here at least 5 years. But when you go for citizenship, one of the important things they ask you in that interview is to prove that you filed taxes in each of the years that you've been a permanent resident. So it's important that you play by the rules, right? Where can I find a sponsor? Face red, droopy eyes. I don't know. A sponsor should be, it's not just like a random person. Like, let's say I've had many people ask me, would I be their sponsor? But am I a good sponsor of someone? No, because if a complete stranger that watches my videos or something asks me to be a sponsor of theirs, and you go before the government and you say to the government, yeah, I don't know him, that's Brit Simon, right? Or they contact me and they say, how do you know this person you sponsored? Then there's absolutely no belief that I'm going to support someone financially, right? It would be a mistake. So the person that sponsors you should be someone that you know, preferably a family member, or a friend of yours, or a friend of a friend of yours, right? Could be a friend of a family member or someone you're connected to, so that you can honestly put your hand on your heart and say, yeah, this person is someone I know. It's a friend of a friend. It's a friend of my brother, and my brother and this person are like lifelong buddies, and this guy is going to help me because he loves my brother, right? That's how it should be. There should be a connection. Now, if you don't have a connection with anyone like that, there are other ways you can prove financial responsibility, which is by showing your own savings, by showing a very lucrative career situation, like you're in a good career position and you're very likely to find work, you can show things that will help you overcome the concern that you'll become a public charge. Okay. Another question. AF 9K submitted in October, pretty late, but you'll have been processed by now, obviously. Embassy Abu Dhabi, check my status, it shows MVC. When can I receive the second letter? No idea. Same as the question from before. K99 Gaming, do you think Nepal has crossed 7% of the whole quota? I have 18K case number and applying for AOS. Please give me some advice. No, I've been doing lottery stuff for about 10 years, a bit more than 10 years now. And in that time, Nepal has never really threatened the 7% barrier. There's been a couple of years where there's been an early cutoff, but generally speaking, they don't actually hit the barrier, right? The 7% limit. 18K is kind of high. We think that the Nepalese numbers, the highest case numbers, are about 20K. So you're in the top 10% or so. But, you have to wait and see. And since you're doing adjustment of status, you will find out in the latest possible time that you would find out whether you're going to go current or not is in July, right? The mid-July period. Mid-July, yeah, for September interviews. So mid-July, and you could then immediately file your adjustment to status if you go current. So there's time to process an adjustment to status if you go current. So you'll be okay if they don't have a cutoff number. The number is kind of low at the moment. And so, you have to wait and see. But because of the dysfunction, I thought this year, I have to say, I thought this year in terms of the visa bulletin would be a lot more organized, a lot better organized. And I'm kind of surprised that that the visa bulletin is behaving as it is. The numbers are already too high in some cases and not high enough in others, like Nepal and Morocco and that sort of thing. So we'll have to wait and see what they do. They should not put any regions current this year, but they probably will because of the dysfunction at some embassies, right? So my thinking is, look, there's mathematically and there's practically. Mathematically, there's no reason to go current with the number of people we got selected. There are too many people selected. There's 119,000 people selected, and only 70,000 or so, 70 to 72,000, will need interviews in order to fill completely the quota. So there's way too many people selected. However, there are some people in some situations, mainly because of some of these embassies that are behaving badly, that are not getting their chances. And because those people are losing their chances, then the number can go higher. The case number on the visa bulletin can go higher. And so we may see regions going current, or countries like Nepal going current, where they remove the number of restrictions entirely. We may see that. Now, when that will happen, I don't know specifically, but we may see that. It's a possibility. And if that happens in your case, because you're doing adjustment of status, you just have to make sure you're ready to file your I-485 using the early filing policy. For goodness sake, make sure you're using the early filing policy. Okay. All right. DV21 question. I talked about that right at the beginning. Go back and watch the beginning. K99 Gaming, you're repeating the question over and over again. Please don't do that. Stop that right now. Thank you. Is there any chance to pass any law from Congress that will reactivate unused green cards from 2021? I don't think that's going to happen, guys. I mean, is there any chance? I mean, is there any chance at all? The only thing that I can tell you is that for DV 2022, that's over because they issued all the visas, right? So there is nothing bringing any further chances to DV 2022. For DV 2021, 2020, yeah, some very, very small chance. But honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the appeal is our best option for DV 2021. And the other visas will remain lost, just as they have done for many years. I mean, if you look back, there's been plenty of years where they didn't use all the visas, right? Living in Sweden, but no assets and no sponsor. What do you think I should do? I think you should get a sponsor. You should get an I-134. I've known Sweden ask for proof of finances. In fact, in Sweden, I think Sweden was the embassy once that someone went there and said they didn't have any I-134, but they were prepared to show savings. And I think it was Sweden that came out and said, okay, you got to show $125,000 in savings, which was a ridiculous amount of money. And I think this is a family of maybe 3 or 4 people. So they have shown in the past, I believe it was Sweden, they have shown in the past that they're concerned about finances. So I would, if I were you, find a friend or a friend of a friend who can do an I-134 for you. Okay. Now, also in Sweden, got a great education system, great language skills. You're going to do well in America, and that might help you, right? Depending on your career and that sort of thing. But if you're an unemployed lumberjack in Sweden and you've got no money and you've got no prospects, then you're going to have a problem. Okay. Thanks for doing this. How will the DV 2020 remaining visas be allocated? Is that determined? No, it's not determined yet. It will be one of the things. In fact, some of the lawyers have even suggested they expect a lottery within the lottery, another lottery, to determine who gets the visas. I'm not sure that's true. I think it'll go by case number, along with an advantage being given to those people who are already scheduled. But there's been nothing determined. We have to see. Okay. So the way that Accra Embassy is performing, do you think they will at least reach AF25K before the fiscal year end? What do you think? I don't know. I have no idea. And really, it's not even a valid question, because the case number is crucially important. That is true. But it's not the whole thing. It's a matter of your case number and when you transition to AV status. In other words, when your case was processed and added to the AV queue. So, I don't know that about your case. So I can't tell you anything about that anyway. Okay. I hope you're doing great. I would like to clarify, in WhatsApp, I will communicate with you, or is it a scam? No. Arta, I think you've asked me this before. And actually, I'm glad you've raised this. There is some asshole commenting on my videos, giving a WhatsApp number and pretending to be me. There is absolutely no way. Please understand this. This is absolutely always going to be the case. There is no way that I am communicating with anybody via WhatsApp. I've got WhatsApp on my phone. I can barely use it. I don't care about it. I speak to my kids with it. That's it. I'm not communicating with you or anyone else on WhatsApp, and I don't do one-to-one consultations. I deliberately don't do that, right? So if somebody is saying to you that, hi, I'm Britt Simon, and for $250 or $100 or whatever, I can advise you, that's a lie. I'm not that person. Okay. And that arsehole who's doing that, I hope he rots in hell. Okay. But it isn't me. So don't give any money to anyone who says they're Britt Simon. Don't ever give anyone, money on WhatsApp to some random person who's copied my picture and, is pretending to be me. Right. If you want to ask me a question, I answer for free on my blog or here on the video or on Twitter. Right? You don't need to pay any money, and you shouldn't be talking to people by WhatsApp if they're pretending to be someone that they're not. Okay? Is it normal that the embassy reschedule my date for an interview on 2NL? The date for the interview is 4/6, but I receive a phone call for the interview. It's normal in your case. It's not normal. Not every case goes through this, but it's normal in your case. It's not a problem. You can always confirm by email with the embassy that they've done that. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Okay. I'm having to scan down ARTA and K99 or whatever because you're spamming the questions over and over again. So I'm having to scroll down. Answered that question. Answered that. Crikey, I've answered a lot of these. Let's see. Go right down to. Okay, I've just gone by a whole bunch of questions because there's too much spamming going on. So I'll answer only the questions that have come in just very recently. Let's see. Yeah, it's a good point. Please stop repeating the questions. It's boring. Yeah, exactly. Please stop repeating the questions. Thank you. All right. So, hi, Brit Simon. Can 3 different selectees have same case numbers, different regions like AS12345 and AF12345? Yes, they can. Thank you for asking that question. It's a good question. It's one I've answered many, many times before. I've explained it in various articles. But yes, the numbering systems for each of the regions starts at 1. So there is a possible situation where there's a case number AF number 1 and Asia number 1 and EU number 1. And then theoretically, there could be, as your example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in all of the regions, right? Because the numbers are completely separate by region. Okay, so that's how that works. A good question. I'm glad you asked that one because I haven't answered it for a while. How to take an I-134 for the interview? Is it enough to have a scanned copy, or do we have to take the original with us? Another good question. The I-134 should be filled out by a sponsor. The sponsor should be living in America. So they're going to fill it out. They're going to download it from the internet, right? And probably send it to you so that you can fill in your pieces because you have to do some of it. And then you're going to scan it and send it back to them, and they're going to fill in their pieces, and they're going to sign it, and they're going to scan that and email it back to you, and you're going to print that out to take to the interview. And you only have to present that if you're asked for it. All right? They don't ask for it in every case. They ask for it sometimes. But it's a great thing to have in your pocket, ready to go and ready to present if you're asked about how you're going to support yourself. Okay? Apply the same day the lottery was pronounced last year. Result will be out this year. What's the probability of winning the lottery? The day you enter the lottery makes no difference to your chances. Doesn't matter whether you enter first on the first day or the last day or some day in the middle, you have the same chance of winning the lottery. Roughly speaking, let's say you're from Africa, your chance is about 1 in 100 years, maybe to 1 in 200 years. It's something in that range, right? It changes year to year, depending on the number of people that enter and the number of people they select. Okay? But it's in that range. Well, this is going to be an interesting question. I had a customary marriage, but it did not work, and she left me for another man before we could formalize our marriage. During the application and interview, should I say I'm single, or what should I say? Oh, this is a very tricky subject, right? Because during application and interviews, okay, you have to understand whether your customary marriage had legal status in your country or not, right? There are some countries. So I answered a question recently on Cameroon, and I think I investigated Cameroon. In Cameroon, there are some types of traditional marriage, but they are not legally binding. They're not legally effective unless they've also been registered. And this is specific to Cameroon, right? They have to have been registered. Until then, they're not binding. So there was a gentleman, I believe, that entered the lottery recently with a customary marriage, and he had not registered his marriage, but he registered in the lottery as being married because of his traditional marriage. He went for interview and was disqualified because his marriage was not legally recognized. Couldn't provide, in fact, he could provide the paperwork, but he did it much, much later. And at the time of entry, he therefore was single, not married. Right, so you have to be aware of whether the customary or traditional marriage has legal impact in your country or not, and you should be able to find that out, right? But if you are married and you say you're not married, that's also a disqualification. So this question of traditional marriage is very important, And you need to be really, really clear and think through the impacts of what you say on your original entry, as well as on your DS-260. Okay, that's one of the easiest ways to get disqualified, is that. Okay. Sydney. Hi, Nicole. I like the dog. Is the Sydney embassy moving in much slower than normal pace? Oceania doesn't seem to be increasing. It's not all about Sydney, of course. I mean, let me just check Sydney. It's not all about Sydney. Looking at it, they're doing about normal processes. First 3 months of the year, they'd taken 46 cases. January, they took another 18 cases, and February, they took 22. That's about normal for them. They only interview people on Tuesday mornings, so that used to be the case. So 22 interviews Tuesday morning. That's about right. That's about their pace, and it's about what they need to do to issue the number of visas they need for the year. That's cases, not people, of course, right? So that if they were doing about 20 to 25 a month, that would be about 300 for the year. Let's say 250 to 300 per year. That would involve about 600 people, and that's more than enough for Sydney, to take all of the visas that they would normally take. Okay, so don't worry, they're doing fine. Do we need all the sponsor documents for the interview, or only the tax return and welcome letter? Because some of the sponsors don't send the documents because of their sensitive information. Yeah, this thing about my sponsor won't reveal his private information to me, then you shouldn't be a bloody sponsor, right? If my brother needs me to be his sponsor, I'm going to give any information I need to give to make sure he's going to be okay, right? And if my friend needs my information, yes, I'm going to show him my social security number, my salary, and my bank information and everything else. Because if I'm not prepared to trust him with that information, then I'm probably not a real sponsor. Get what I'm saying? So yes, he needs to show you that. So specifically, what does the sponsor need to provide? He needs to provide an I-134, an annual tax report, which is called a 1040, or a W-2. It needs to be recent pay slips and his driving license. And yes, that's very intrusive. That's a lot of information for someone to give on your behalf. You'll know everything about their finances, right? And how much money they're earning and everything else, right? So it's a big deal. But being a sponsor is not something anybody should take on lightly. It isn't actually legally binding, but nevertheless, if they're not prepared to give you that information, then you probably don't know them well enough. Okay. Tim here. Massive thanks for everything. Got my visa on 23rd of February, March. March. I'll be leaving a detailed review of the experience on the blog. Thank you. That interview experience, many people ask me about how are the interviews, what are they like, etc. And to be able to refer to people, to on my blog, it's Britt Simon says interview experiences. I think something like that. But just Google Britt Simon interview experiences, and you'll find several years worth of first-person accounts of what their interview is like at various embassies. And if you read enough of them, you'll realize that the interviews are very easy, very short, and very similar from one embassy to another, right? So there's some slight differences case to case, of course, because people have different situations. But that information is like gold to people going through this process, because they know, therefore, what they're going to be asked. It's not that they should prepare for the answers, but at least they can be relaxed about answering the questions, and it will make them realize what they've got to prepare in terms of documentation and that sort of thing. So thank you, Tim, for offering to fill that in. It's very useful. It will help. Please do make sure you mention the embassy that you interview at. That's a marvelous thing. Okay. All right. Holding admission to one US university. So what happens if I win DV 2024? One US. Will I still go for a DV visa interview? Yes, you will. If you're in America, there's a thing called adjustment of status. It's only 5% of DV lottery winners go through that process. but it's for someone who is legally in the USA on a non-immigrant visa, and there's a whole different process that you go through to adjust status. And that means you don't have to leave the USA to be able to apply for the DV status, DV process. Okay, so it's good. Hi, Britt. I received an email from KCC about a month ago saying that my case is now current for interview, but I've not received the 2NL. How long will it take to be scheduled? I'm in Accra. Okay, so this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. So your AV transition date was around about a month ago, right? That the email that you received where they say you're current for interview processing, that specific phrase is in the email that you received. That means you're in stage 4 or AV status, right? And you've been allocated to a queue for Accra Embassy. The problem you have is that there are a number of people, and I don't know the number, but a number of people before you that were allocated to that AV queue for Accra before you, right, in previous months. And so because Accra are only taking 30 cases per month, they will only take about another 200 cases. And I'm pretty sure that the queue for Accra is probably much larger already than 200 cases, which means you're significantly at risk of never getting an interview, I'm sorry to say. And you'll have to wait and see. You'll have a risky, fearful wait for a few months. But I have to say, it's very likely that if you only transitioned a month ago, you may never get an interview. And once you've been allocated to the queue for an embassy, it's very difficult to get out of that queue. Very difficult indeed. So it's not good news, I'm afraid. So all you can do is wait and hope. Pray if you're religious. But there you go. Good luck. Sorry for asking. You no need to be sorry for asking. It's just that you asked about a million times. Right? So I've already answered that question. Any information from 221G? It used to be called administrative processing. It still is really called administrative processing in normal conversation. It's a period of time when they're either getting additional documentation from you or doing additional background checks. It can be for various reasons that you're placed onto 221G. It's a temporary refusal. So in other words, they're saying, look, you're refused for now, but that could change. That decision could change if you provide us documentation, which we think is missing, or if the background checks that we're going to perform come through okay, or whatever it is that they're trying to do. Okay. Hope that explains 221G a little bit better for you. If I have an asset like an apartment, is it good for not being asked to bring a sponsor? No, that is not helpful. The thing is that it's not a liquid asset, right? So you own an apartment, big deal. It doesn't mean a thing. You can own an apartment which is worth $1 million, but you can have $1 million on mortgage, and therefore you don't have any money, right? And even if you've got $1 million apartment and you've got no mortgage or a very small mortgage, you would have to go through a process to sell that in order to release those funds. So no, it doesn't really meet the test for liquid assets. And it might be somewhat interesting to discuss, like if they ask you your plans, you might say something like, look, I own my apartment in Paris or whatever it is. My plan when I go to America is I'm going to sell that apartment, and that will give me some money, and I'm going to go to the States with that money. Or you can say, I'm going to keep that apartment, I'm going to rent it out, and that will help me live for the first couple of years with the rent. Rent money will be helping. You can say those things, but it's not the ideal way to meet the financial situation, public charge situation. Okay, there's no harm in saying it. It's just not likely to be 100% helpful. Yeah, there you go. I'm missing your questions. Yeah, thank you. I'm looking for the questions, real actual questions here. Archer, I can't believe, have I gone up or something? What's going on here? I don't know. Any predictions for Greece? For what? In the World Cup or something? What are we talking about for Greece? I don't really have any predictions for Greece yet because I don't know what you're asking really. Is Algiers embassy doing good? Let me just check Algiers. Algiers embassy. Yeah, they're doing pretty good. So they are doing good. Yeah, they've taken 664 in the first 3 months. Then they took in January, they took 200 cases, and in February they took another 335 cases. So yeah, that's pretty active. Okay, if they keep on that pace, they're certainly doing more than enough to to do all the work they need. So that's one of the good embassies. Lol, Mr. Brick, you are frank. Amen to that. People don't need to play around if you don't want to help. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Let's see. Arthur and others that repeat your questions, please stop doing that. It really messes up the system. It sort of scrolls by and it just messes up the whole thing. So I end up missing a lot of questions that are from other people that didn't repeat the same question 58 times, right? So Prince Owusu, sending greetings from MA, Massachusetts. My God, you must be freezing your ass off. Why did you choose Massachusetts? Oh dear, you're living the American dream, but in a cold place. But anyway, I'm glad you're doing well. It just makes me cold thinking about it. It's cold enough here. I'm like fed up with the weather in California at the moment because it's been raining and cold, and we've all had enough of it. Got a 221G after my interview. After submitting the ASK documents, the status changed from refused to ready. What's likely to happen with my case? Okay, so I don't like to predict these status updates, but I will say this. In order to, once you're on refused, they don't really need to update your status to refuse you, right? So if your status changes to ready, then it's somewhat hopeful that you're then going to go to the next stage. And the next stage would be either the words administrative processing or issued, right? So you're pretty likely to get that. Now, it's not 100% certain. Again, the visa is not guaranteed until it's in your hands. But I will say that for cases that see the word administrative processing, that status is only used these days when the visa is being printed. So that is actually a pretty solid one. And normally when you see CX says issued, you can be pretty confident, okay? But really, just wait until you got the visa in your hands, okay? Got your visa approved in March 2nd. That's great, Tudor. Well done. Another young man with great dreams and a good future in America. That's awesome. Oh my God, K99 Gaming. You repeated loads of questions earlier, and I answered one of your questions, and then I said, don't repeat questions. And now I see you're repeating questions. So guess what I'm going to do? Will Nepal go AOS from July? I'm now not going to answer that question because I know you've repeated it loads of times. I'm deliberately not going to answer your question. Okay? I wonder if there's a way you could avoid that happening. Okay. I was glad to see you've answered this again because I know you were frustrated with people repeating questions. So, is it allowed to enter the lottery year after year? I was selected in 2023. However, I entered 2024 lottery again. Absolutely, it is. There's no harm in that at all. In fact, I'm a US citizen now, and I have entered the lottery after becoming a US citizen. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter at all. Now, someone's going to say now, oh, but if you had won, that takes a chance away from somewhere else. Look, it doesn't work like that because they select far more people than can go through. So let's say last year I entered and I win. Does that mean that it's ruining the chance of someone else? No, it doesn't mean that because they select over 100,000 people and there are only 55,000 visas. So if I, as a winner, drop out, then someone behind me is ready to take that case. So it doesn't take anything away from anybody. Okay, but anyway, back to your question. There's absolutely no problem with that. I know people who've entered the lottery like 15 years in a row, right? More. Some people will enter time and time again and they'll never win, right? You won in 2023. Hopefully that will be your year, but there's no harm caused by your entry in 2024. Okay, no problem at all. Such a blind person you are. Are you talking to me? I am a little blind, yeah, with these glasses. What I just saw this question. I guess you guys are arguing or something. I don't know. If you reject one time, you could fill in the form next time. Yeah, you could do that. So if you've been rejected one year because you made some silly mistake, like you left your spouse off or something like that, it doesn't mean you can't enter again. It just means that you made a mistake in that 1 year. As long as you don't tell them any lies. There are some situations where you enter, you make some sort of mistake, and you try and cover that mistake up with some lies, right? That can get you permanently banned. So don't do that, right? If you were born in one of the eligible countries, but living in the UK, can you apply for DV? Yes, of course. Your ability to enter the lottery is based on where you were born, not where you live. Okay, so you can do that. There's also some other things. You'll notice I'm British. I was born in the UK. I was born in Scotland, actually. But I'm married to a Spanish woman, a woman from Spain. So through her, I was able to enter the lottery, and she entered the lottery, and actually she became the winner, and I was the derivative in her application in 2014. DV 2014 was my year. Just a bit of trivia. You're welcome. Well, yeah. I was about to say, what a beautiful photo, but I realized that's sexist and horrible, and so I apologize. I'm old school, but there you go. And this person still thinks I'm blind, apparently. So, case number from below 300 from Iran. Accra is the embassy chosen in the DS260. No to an Ls. Any help? Oh man, case number below 300 from Iran. I mean, that's, there were 20 million people entered the lottery, and the numbers were all sorted, and everybody that entered the lottery was given a number from 1 to 20 million, right? Sort of, by region. And you were in the first 300 numbers. I mean, that's amazing, right? That should be rewarded with a visa. So I'm sorry you're still waiting. It sucks. And I hope that will change, but I can't guarantee it will change. I don't know when that will, when that will happen, but good luck. Okay. Esan, you're the guy that thinks I'm blind, right? Yeah. Why do you think I'm blind, Esan? Case number below. Oh, it's you. It's you. It's you. Oh dear, it's the same guy. Oh, I'm sorry you're going through that. But why do you think I'm blind? How is Nairobi progressing? Horribly. Terribly. Nairobi is probably one of my worst shit list embassies this year, along with Accra. They did take 105 interviews on the 3rd of March. That's the only sort of saving grace. So they did 117 cases, or they took 117 cases in the first 3 months of the year. Then in February, in January, they took 60 more. They took none in the month of February, but they did take some in early March, the 3rd of March, 105. It's a slight increase from what they took in January. And so I'm hopeful that means that they're increasing their capacity, but they need to get on with it, because Nairobi is a very big, important embassy for DV lottery that normally would take 2,000 to 3,000 cases in a year. So they should be taking 250, 300 cases a month, right? So 100 doesn't cut it. And they've only taken so far this year, they've only taken 270 cases. It's not enough. That's like 1 month's worth, and we're already 6 months in. So they have created a problem, and I suspect there's going to be a bad outcome. But there's time for them to turn it around. I just don't know that they are, that they are planning to turn it around. Okay. Hi, Brett. Do you fill DS260 for a spouse who will not be traveling with you? No, you don't. Now, when you say traveling with you, let me just be clear what I think you mean by that. If you are married, but you're planning to leave your wife, let's say, or your husband, and you're going to America, and you've decided to live apart and separate or whatever else, then no, you don't fill out the DS260 for your spouse. If what you mean though is you're going to travel first, and then 2 months later your spouse is going to travel, and she wants a green card or he wants a green card, then yes, you still fill in a DS260, but you just travel at different times, right? So when you say this phrase, "will not be traveling with you," you need to be clear about what that means. So, but a DS260 is only filled out by someone who wants a green card, right? Okay. What if you asked this question about photos earlier, so you're clarifying a little bit now. What if the photo that was uploaded in the entry doesn't match the person because of various reasons, like gaining weight, scars? Will that be an issue during the interview? No, as long as it's not like a different person. If you had scars in the first photo that have magically disappeared in the second photo, then that's not very good, right? That probably means you're not the same person. If you've gained weight, you've changed weight, you've lost weight, or whatever else, that's not necessarily a problem if the timeline looks reasonable. But if you were 100 pounds in weight when you took the first photo, and 6 months later you're 480 pounds or something, that's not very likely, right? So, you need to be. It needs to be reasonable. It needs to be obvious to someone looking at that photo that you are the same person that's sitting in front of them that the photo was of the time before, right? Just talked about Nairobi. And let me just see if I can take a couple more questions here. About Paris Embassy, do you think it's slow this year? This week, more than 77 cases in the pipe. Paris isn't an enormous embassy in terms of DV. Yeah, I see what you mean. So it's going a bit slow, but it's not so bad. February, they took 62 cases. In January, they took 9, right? So, it's not so bad. It's probably not. It's probably not bad considering what they have to take. Remember, there are not many winners from Paris. There's probably quite a lot from the Africa region in Paris, let's say. But there's not very many winners from France, right? So they don't have to take many cases. Addis I talked about earlier, I believe. So Sava, when you win the visa, you could take your family with you, like mum and sister, or just your husband. It's only yourself, your spouse, and your children, or stepchildren, or it could be biological children, stepchildren, or adopted children, right? But anyway, it's your children. It's not your sister. It's not your mom. It's not your cousins and your uncles. It's none of them. You don't take all the rest of the family. The only thing you can do is that if you win a DV lottery visa, you then later become a citizen. Once you're a citizen, which comes after 5 years of living in America, you're then able to sponsor some of those other people. So, for example, a US citizen can sponsor their parent with almost no delay whatsoever. So once you become a citizen, you can give a green card to your parent straight away. And your parent can then sponsor their children, but that could take years. So, you can't bring all of your family immediately. There's different rules depending on the relationship, but there is a way. It's called family migration. They will help you get the family across eventually, but it could take a number of years. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Essen. I accept your apology. And yeah, having a number that low and not getting an interview, it sucks. So I understand why you're frustrated. Simon, I'm interested in EB3 and so good in trucking. Who can I get to apply some for me? I have no idea. I answer questions about the DV lottery, nothing else. I don't know anything about anything else. Can a derivative have a different interview location for a reasonable issue? Generally not. Technically, it can happen, but because the DV lottery has a tight timeline, it often doesn't work to do this. So you move heaven and earth to make sure that your family is all together in the same room for the interview. This is a once in a lifetime, opportunity. You don't let some silly reason be the reason why you're not all at the interview at the same time, right? And frankly, unless you're stuck on Mars, there is almost no other reason that I can accept as being a reasonable reason. Okay, I don't care what, oh, she's away at school, so she couldn't be here. Bullshit. That's not a good reason. If your child is away at school, get that child to your interview, right? Miss a week of bloody school, right? You don't ruin a lifetime's opportunity for the sake of some kid being at school, or plane tickets being expensive, or some stupid nonsense. Honestly, there is really people need to understand how big a deal this is. Okay. All right. Yeah, I talked about the visa bulletin. I'm expecting it on Monday or Tuesday, but we'll see. Okay. Last question. Let me just. Okay, so what is it? Linda Mal. Interesting name. So how do you check progress? This is a question you probably all will have. So I'm going to post a link here to Zarthisius' site. You can go on that site, scroll down, and in there you can put the embassy you're interested in seeing. And that's what I've been doing during this live session here. As you've asked a question about this embassy or that embassy, I simply type that information into this webpage, and I'll show you how. I'll quickly show you how I do that, just so you can all do that. Let me show this in a second. Where am I? Okay, present, share screen. Come on. Entire screen. This one. Okay. All right. So this is the web page I'm talking about. So I've just put the link to this in the chat, and this is my I'd like to say my good friend, although I've never met him, but we've talked many, many times, who extracts the data from the SEAC database system and puts it into this this web page so that we can all look at the numbers. And in here, you can type in, you can see I had Paris, but you can type in the embassy you're interested in, and it shows you when they accepted the cases, what the number range is of those cases. It shows you all the data that you need to have, right? So that's how you check that. Now, Linda Bar, seeing your case number now, AF 45,000. That number is quite high. And because of the backlog at Accra, you can see they're only up to about case number 20,000. And this number is not going to grow very much over the next few months. I mean, I think there's significant risk for your number, I have to say. If you're not already in AV status, and if you can move to another country, do that. Okay, because you're probably not going to get your visa at Accra, in all honesty. So that would be my suggestion to you. Okay, let me just see if there's one last question I can answer, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, this will be the last one of the day. As a single DV 2023 winner, working and with savings, does the affidavit of support apply to me? Interview is in April in Paris. It's a wise thing to have, right? Firstly, the job you've got now, you're not going to have when you move to America, right? So just the fact that you're working now makes no difference. if you've got savings, that can help, but you need to be able to show a minimum of around about $10,000 per person, right? Minimum. When I first came to America, when when my family came, etc., I think I went through $40,000, just sort of for the first 2 or 3 months in setting up a home. I bought a car. I had to buy some furniture for an apartment, a house I rented. I had to put a deposit down on the house. So I had to pay, like the house was, I don't know, maybe $3,000 per month. I had to put a security deposit down. I had to pay a month's rent in advance, and I think maybe I paid last month's rent. So I put something like $6,000 or $8,000 down straight away on that. So when I say $10,000 per person, I really mean it. I mean, you need to have that sort of money, right? It won't go very far. So now, if you've got lots of savings, that might be enough. But Paris Embassy have been known to ask for an I-134. So if I were going for an interview there or at any embassy, I would have an I-134. If you can get one, if you've got someone who you know in America that will sponsor you, then it's a wise thing to have. It just makes sense. Okay, that was the last question that I'm going to answer. Thank you everyone for your questions today. Even those of you that repeated your questions. But anyway, I hope there was something in the session that was interesting to you and that answered your question. Please do ask any other questions. If I missed your question, go ahead and ask that question at britsimonsays.com, and I will answer it there for sure. I religiously, if you'll forgive the term from an atheist, I religiously answer the questions at britsimonsays.com. All right, it's the one place where I'm guaranteed to answer your question. I don't answer questions by email, and I answer only some questions in forums. I don't answer all the questions in all the forums. I just don't have the time. But I do answer the questions that are put on britsimonsays.com. All right, so make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, please. Give me a thumbs up, like if you like this video, and I'll try and do better and come back online as soon as I can. All right. Oh, I do have a trip coming up. I'm taking my RV, which is like a camper van, you might call it, but a very large one. I'm taking my RV and my car, and I'm taking my daughter is coming from the UK, along with one of my grandsons, and I'm taking a camping trip, which is going to be early April. So I'm going to be, maybe not available during some of that time, but I will try and keep up with the questions at britsimonsays.com. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening in today. All right. Bye-bye now.